Welcome back to the Cheap Heat Productions podcast. Okay, welcome back to the show. And a face you probably recognize from your childhood, I certainly do from mine on the screen at the moment. Former six-time hardcore champion, one-time European champion, one-time tag team champion in WWF, and the current one that makes the wheels spin in OVW Wrestling, Mr. Al Snow. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you? And I don't know if I would necessarily agree with that, but hey, about making the wheel spin. I think the talent make the wheel spin, not me.
I had 24 hours to come up with one because we had a few technical difficulties last night. So
Yeah.
I just threw that in there. You never know what I'm really going to say. I just kind of go with it. But I think that'd be fair to say. But touching on OVW to start with, how has the last year been for you? With everything that's
Of
going
course,
on?
like with everybody with COVID, it's been a challenge. I mean, it's been hard. We were completely shut down with restrictions. We couldn't have an audience of any sort. We couldn't operate the trade school at all. So, we had very little, if no, income coming in, and but we've survived and come out the other side, and we've had a great summer. We've had probably 3 to 4 live events a week, including our weekly television show that we do live on Fight TV every Thursday. And we do it across the country, nationally on a bunch of different national networks and over around the world as well. And it's starting to turn around, and we're starting to get some momentum again, and starting to build that much needed perception, and as the place to come and to be. So, that was my goal when I bought the company, was to build a company that young talent could come in and truly learn everything that they needed to learn, and experience everything they needed to experience, to give them the best chance to take advantage of an opportunity on a larger platform that they may receive, and then also create an area, a company that former guys that have had their runs on major platforms could come, work, make a living, and reinvent themselves. And so we're getting closer every day to that goal of creating that kind of a platform.
Tuesdays at 10 p.m. on Sky over here in Ireland and the UK, your show does air.
Yes.
It was actually, when I went back, we tried this interview last night. We encountered a few technical difficulties. I went back in, turned on the TV, and there it was.
There it was. Yeah.
It's meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is on Sky Network there in the UK and in Ireland as well. So, we're really happy about that. It's on Sports International, which is a European sports channel as well. So we're, and it's giving our talent a level of exposure that they just can't quite get anywhere else. Not to mention experience of learning to perform on live television, because really the only other places that are doing it as far as wrestling is concerned are WWE and AEW on a weekly basis. So, the last thing you want as a talent is to be given an opportunity in WWE or AEW, be thrown in the deep end of the pool on live TV and have never done it before in your career, and go, here you go, buddy. Sink or swim, and you're out there with no experience whatsoever. So, by doing it live, it gives every talent a better understanding and better experience, so that when they do get those chances, and they will, get those opportunities, then they can really capitalize on them.
It seems from looking at the outside in on America at the moment that wrestling is going to enter another boom stage over there with the amount of independent wrestling that there is going on. And then you have things like Fight TV to broadcast these shows. Do you find that over there that wrestling is really, it's not just WWE and AEW now, you get like ample opportunities on different promotions. And as you said, on TV.
I hope so. I really hope that we hit a boom period. That would be thrilling for me. You know, it could, you know, and as a fan of wrestling, it would be thrilling for me, not just as a businessman, but as a fan of wrestling as well, because, you know, when the wrestling business is thriving, it's great for the fans, and, you know, gives them an incredible opportunity to really see and experience different styles, different takes of things. You know, let's always remember, you know, especially no matter what I say in this interview, that it's an art, it's subjective. So, you know, my viewpoint might be one way and someone else's might be a totally different way as well. You know, and, you know, even when back in the territorial days, the regional days, you know, that every promoter had their own direction, their own style. The only thing that really united us was that understanding of what it was that we all sold to the audience, what the audience paid to see and paid to believe in. And then in that sense, you know, that's not really a subjective thing. That's kind of a carved in stone kind of thing. But how you approach it, how you go about it, that's, you know, it's not my circus, it's not my monkeys. So,
yeah.
You know, and you know, with the way I do things, somebody else may not necessarily agree with as well. So,
do you think compared to back in the day that there's a lot more openness for different promotions to cross promote, and guys like might wrestle for you and they can wrestle somewhere else, but kind of back in the day, maybe it could have been you're here and you can't go anywhere else? Do you find, like, an example being, maybe it's a bad example to give, but say Chris Jericho is in AEW and he went and done Steve Austin's podcast on the network, like that's a big example, but on an independent level, is that kind of thing happening?
Doing Steve Austin's podcast is different than being on Raw. Do you understand? There's a big fence, a big fence in between doing AEW Dynamite and now if Chris Jericho shows up on Raw, that's doing something, you know. You know, but in regards to, you know, AEW working with Impact and AEW and Impact working with NWA, and I think it's brilliant, and I think that it's only good business because they can pool their resources. Because at the end of the day, there are a couple truths that we cannot avoid with professional wrestling. One truth is that WWE is an iconic brand, meaning it's like Band-Aid or Q-Tip or, you know, Harley Davidson here in the United States for motorcycles. That's when you think professional wrestling, you think WWE. That's just, it's a fact. That's one of the biggest things they've got going for them. Secondly, they have so many resources, you know, and they haven't even tapped into them. I'm not just talking financially. I'm talking, you know, staff and talent that they haven't even come close to scratching the surface on. Third, you know, the biggest thing is that they've got decades of experience and decades of operation that, you know, any startup company is just not going to be able to compete with. You know, they've already made lots of mistakes and already seen things go wrong and seen things go right. And, you know, Vince's grandfather, Vince's father, Vince himself, you know, Vince is, you know, took over the company in the late 70s, early 80s. You know, he was working with his father and doing every aspect of the company before he took over. You know, Stephanie and Shane had literally worked in every aspect, from the loading docks and, you know, in the warehouse to TV studios to setting up the ring to you name it. So they know that inside and out and have known it for years. So you're not going to out WWE. So why not, you know, take it in a new direction and see if you can't pool those resources and, you know, and combine those strengths that you have as much as possible. And I think it's, and not try to compete with WWE, because you're not going to outdo WWE. Just go and make your own trail, make your own vision, make your own version, and carve out a percentage of the marketplace that's strictly for you.
Yeah, and I think that's happening at the moment, really, isn't it?
I think so. It seems like it, and I think it's a very, very smart way to go. I mean, I would here in OVW, I would be completely open to working with people as well, and working with other companies. It broadens your talent pool. It gives your talent different platforms to reach a different audience, to expand their exposure and thus increase their value. Because let's never forget, a wrestler's value is in direct relationship. And I don't care what anybody says, it's in direct relationship to what their name on a piece of advertising will motivate an audience to want to see them. Period.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. They're not in, it's not, there's a big discussion, and I always try to say something kind of controversial on every podcast, so that way it'll anger some people, and they'll want to, and then it'll drive people to want to watch it and listen to it. But I don't think this is, but people are going to get angry with this, and they're not going to agree. But the wrestlers are not employees. They're business. It's a business relationship with the promoter, and the promoter provides the platform, and the wrestler then takes advantage of that platform, capitalizes on it, makes themselves into a star, and the promoter and the wrestler then exploit that, and together they make money. A wrestler is not entitled. Nobody in entertainment, not just a wrestler, but musicians and actors and comedians, and you're not entitled to get paid just because you perform a service. You're not working at Walmart. Your value is in direct relationship to how many people showed up or tuned in to watch that show based on just you. And if the answer is 0, that's what you're worth. If the answer is a whole bunch of people, guess what? You're worth a whole bunch of money.
Yeah.
So that's the endeavor, is to make yourself worth a whole bunch of people watching you, so that you can get paid a whole bunch of money.
Mm-hmm. We'll take it back a little bit, and I'm going to throw out random stuff from your career. And I was reading that you worked as a tag team with Glenn Jacobs in Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
Yes, it was a great experience. Yes.
What was it like to work with Glenn Jacobs, and what is he like as a person? Because obviously we've seen the persona over the 90s of the scary guy and the backstory and everything to the unmasking, and now the guy's like a politician. It's crazy, isn't it? The way the world works.
Glenn Jacobs is a very highly intelligent person. He's a very kind, very gentle person, but a very big, huge person too. So, but working wrestling, and being a part of a team with him was awesome. My only regret is that I didn't do it quite the right way, and I wish Jim Cornette had maybe gave me more guidance. I was what's known as I was supposed to be the guy that started the fight and then let Glenn finish it. And a lot of times I did too much on my own and should have relied more physically on Glenn to put the thing. I would have garnered more real heat from the audience that would have made us more of a factor in a draw. So, that was a mistake on my part.
And what was ECW like to work in back in the day? Like when you were working there, was it as crazy as it sounded or seemed on screen, or what was the differences, say, between there and working in WWF at the time?
In ECW was a lot more by the seat of your pants. It was, and now, even then, I kind of remember, mentioning to a lot of the wrestlers in the locker room that we were making a mistake, and that was, we were letting the fans direct us a little too much, to the point to where we're literally violating the very concept of what we were trying to sell, which was we're trying to make everyone believe that we're in a competitive situation. Like the referee really has authority. We have to really follow certain rules, just like you would in any other sports. And we threw all that out the window. It just, the referee was just there to make a 3 count, nothing else, and I think we inspired a lot of what happens in wrestling today with that. And I think it was a mistake. I don't think it was the right track to do. It worked, but I think the reason that it worked was because it really truly was the right thing at the right time for the right reason for the right audience. The problem was that for, we all, romanticize ECW, and it was awesome. I mean, it really, what a wonderful, positive place, and what a great place for people to reinvent themselves and, I did it myself. But the problem is that it was marketed to a very niche audience, no ifs, ands, or buts. And that was ultimately what doomed it, was that it was marketed to a very small percentage of a very broad audience, as opposed to marketing to a very broad audience, which was, there's no denying that that's the one success that WWE has always had, is that they've been able to market to the general audience very successfully. And when we've had those boom periods of wrestling in the 80s and then again in the late 90s, early 2000s, that's what allowed them to capitalize to its fullest extent, because they were so well versed in marketing to the general Mr. and Mrs. Tesco in the UK and Mr. and Mrs. Walmart in the United States. And the reason I use that term is because that's where the majority of the population shops. So, and again, wrestling is a subjective, it's an art, and you're free once you have your own promotion or whatever, which I would advise never do that, because I rid myself by doing this. But once you get in the ring, you're free to do it any way you want. That's your artistic, and you're only limited by your own imagination and creativity. But, and you could be very successful in marketing to that niche audience, but I would always try to advise that you market to as broad and as general an audience as possible with whatever efforts you're doing, so that you can make life-changing money, and, you can control your own fate that way.
But obviously Head was born in ECW, and that's one of the kind of most iconic memories of people that have with you. Do you want to explain how that idea was born?
I tried to, at the time, quit WWF. I might be one of the few, I don't know, but I tried to quit. They rolled over my contract. They had an option and rolled it over for another year. And I was very wrongfully frustrated, and pointing the finger at everyone else except for the one person that could be held accountable, and that was me. And but I knew that I had to get someplace else and reinvent myself and basically get myself back over, so that they could see me in a different light. Because if I stayed there, that's where it was going to be, and it was going to take a lot to shift that perception. So I was very lucky, through the grace of, Chris Candido was an amazing friend, and he was, working hand in hand with Paul, and Paul went to Bruce and Bruce Pritchard, and they basically put me on loan over there. I was still under contract with WWF, and Paul didn't have any real plans for me, didn't have any ideas, no direction, but he left me to myself. And at the time, I was trying to show that I had had a nervous breakdown, and read a book on abnormal psychology, and there was between a case study of a woman who had paranoid schizophrenia, where she transferred her illness onto the very inanimate object she heard from, and a memory I had of Mick playing around with a styrofoam head, acting like it was his girlfriend, in the car after a show one night. I found a styrofoam head there, and that where they used to make the Lumber Day parade and floats, and I started taking it to the ring and talking to it and treating it like it was a real person, and like it was crazy. They were crazy, not me. And then it just took off from there.
Yeah. Do you want to know the one thing, like I was saying to people, if you have any suitable questions for Al Snow, would you send them in to me? Do you want to know what was the most popular thing they wanted to know about?
Sure, yeah.
They wanted to know about the scene with you and the boss man in the hotel room where he fed you pepper.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Did you, I say you guys had a lot of fun making that.
Oh, we always had, Ray Traylor was an awesome person, an awesome human being. And I was very fortunate to be able to work with him and wrestle with him. And, and we went and did the vignettes, and I think we mixed Chinese food and creamed green beans and something else to make it look like I threw up. And, it was a lot of fun.
The acting between you two guys though was like it was really good. Like you had a special chemistry together, you two.
I feel that we did. Yeah. It's just unfortunate that when we got to the actual blow off part of the blow off match,
Yeah.
They used untrained animals, which we had built the entire concept, or the entire crux of the story was around the dogs. And, once we got to that point, we couldn't use, the dogs were useless in the match. I mean, they just were, and ultimately though, it's our responsibility to take shit and make shoe polish, and but we just couldn't. I mean, our hands were tied. I mean, the dogs were urinating, fornicating, defecating so much that you couldn't even show them on TV. So
yeah,
that was crazy.
Yeah. He was a really, really dark character in those times, like with the stuff he done with Big Show as well, but he executed so well,
Yeah. He was great to be in the ring with as well.
Yeah. I had Bill DeMott on a couple of weeks ago, and I was chatting to him about Tough Enough and his memories from it. Do you think a show like that would work these days, and what's your memories from it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would work. I think that it was a great infomercial for professional wrestling. I think that it was a great vehicle to recruit new talent, and I think that it was a great way to expand the audience and bring people into professional wrestling that normally didn't watch it. In fact, I've had people, both men and women of all walks of life, all ages, come up to me and, I was not a fan of wrestling, but I watched Tough Enough, and then I followed the kids and started watching wrestling because of it. Or my wife never watched wrestling, but she watched Tough Enough, and then she fell in love with these kids and she started watching with me. And I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I've heard that, response. And I think that, I think that if you were a fan of professional wrestling, I think that it made you appreciate just how much passion and how much physical work and dedication and sacrifice goes into it. I hate to say sacrifice. Mm-hmm. You don't really sacrifice in life. You know what I mean? You make choices, you make decisions, and there's a price for what you pursue. And, but to see those kids pay that price and pursue it, and then also to deal with, that was the one thing that was always fascinating to me, even when I've just run the wrestling schools for years, is watching people come to grips with the romanticized fantasy of what they want to do, as opposed to the reality of what it's really going to take to accomplish it. Mm-hmm. And watching the kids go through that was always, fascinating and entertaining. And, watching the dynamic in the house of, personalities as well. And then, if you weren't a fan of wrestling, it made you actually get engaged to the characters because you knew who they were, to the point, and I can, that, Dana White even said this, that the reason of the explosion of UFC was in direct relationship to the show Ultimate Fighter, which was a complete ripoff of Tough Enough, and it was because of the fact that, the audience could now start to relate to who the fighters were and care about who won and lost. And that was what caused UFC to, become what it became. And for wrestling, it much was the same way.
It's an example of what you said earlier of WWE kind of broadening their audience. That's kind of nailed it on the head.
Yeah. Back to touch back on that, they, a lot of the promotions now market to a wrestling audience, and their wrestlers, when they're in the ring, that to sell, there's a big misnomer that they believe that to sell is just to show that you're hurting, and that's not what it is. It's to sell the who you are and the why you're doing it. And the wrestlers have now gotten to a point where they predominantly they sell what they do, and that only appeals to a wrestling audience. It doesn't appeal to the average Joe who's a casual fan of wrestling. They are more interested in who a person is and why are they out in that ring. That's the same with boxing. That's the same with MMA. You don't watch MMA pay-per-views except for two reasons, and that's who it is and why are they fighting? What's at stake? Same with boxing. Same with any sport. You watch soccer. You like one team. You like one team and one particular player they focus on because they're focusing on telling you who that player is and now what's at stake. Why is this game important? What's the consequence of winning and losing? Not the what, the why.
Do you think there's a lack of backstory and character development in WWE programming these days compared to what you had in the 90s and 80s, was that?
I don't know. I really don't get much of a chance or an opportunity to watch either WWE or AEW because I'm so involved here in OVW.
Yeah.
In anything I would say would just be speculation and assumption, and I really couldn't tell you.
Okay, I'll kick it back to yourself then, and you for what you do when you're working with guys. Yeah. Do you try and build a backstory for your wrestlers and give them a certain personas?
I focus on 100% focus on the who and the why all the time. 100% focus on who and why. That's all I'm selling here. Is I try to instruct the wrestlers to that is what we are selling and to focus on that during the context of their match.
Mm-hmm. So when you say
they're free to do whatever they physically, there are only two things that I don't let them do per se in the ring. And that's one, I don't let them bump anybody or bump themselves on the ring apron unless I'm a reasonable guy, unless they can explain to me how the audience knows that ring apron is one, the most dangerous part of the ring, and two, is the hardest part of the ring, even though nobody in the audience has ever been in the ring and they think it's a trampoline or a mattress.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want them taking chances to suffer a life-altering or life-ending injury and get what out of it from the audience, because the audience isn't aware that ring apron is incredibly hard and incredibly dangerous where it meets at that 90-degree angle. I also don't let them buckle bomb each other because, again, unless you can explain to me how the audience knows that turnbuckle it is real steel and there's a real chance you could be injured, even when you just take a turnbuckle, let alone somebody picking you up and throwing you to where you have no control over how you hit. If you could explain to me how that audience knows that and understands that and relates to that to where it's now going to put you in more jeopardy or your opponent in more jeopardy of losing, and the audience is going to get that, hey, buckle bomb your ass off. I don't care. Because you know why? I can't feel it backstage. But if you, being responsible like I am and trying to ensure the safety of the performers, I won't let them do it unless they can justify to me how the audience knows the difference. Simple as that. Other than that,
free reign.
You do what you want, do it, but you have to do it within the context of, are you trying to use it to beat the person? Because at the end of the day, no matter what I do, okay, no matter how athletic it is, there's only one consequence to anything I do to my opponent, and that is that I could possibly beat him with it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the only consequence. Nothing else exists. So, the minute that I do it, and then I go, wait a minute, let me pick you back up from the very place I could beat you, and I'll do something bigger. Well, now I've just made that mean nothing, so there's no consequence to it. There's no consequence to it. There's no drama. There's no, oh my God, he might lose. If there's no drama, there's no heat. Heat is not offense in a match. Heat's a want. It's a need to, like watching a foot race and one runner starts pulling out ahead further and further and further on the track. And now you're cheering on the other runner to try to catch up. And eventually, maybe, hopefully they'll pass. That's what heat is, But if you invalidate the very consequence to anything you physically do, then there's no way to generate that. And if there's no way to generate it, then your success at being able to sell tickets to motivate people to want to pay to see it is going to be a lot tougher. It's going to be a lot harder to achieve. So here in OVW, that's the sole focus is me really trying to focus on every aspect that they sell who they are and why they're doing it.
I'll give you a fun question before we wrap up.
Sure.
I've asked a good few people this now. I'm interested to see what your response will be. If you were trapped on a desert island and you needed to pick 3 wrestlers to survive with you, who would they be?
Well, they're going to be all female, that'd be sure.
That's what I had Rene Dupree on, and he said, Tori Wilson, Tori Wilson, Tori Wilson.
Yeah, I know, you know. Yeah, we've got time to kill. I don't want to waste it just having conversations. Come on.
Yeah. Okay, so we won't mention any names. We'll just say 3 unnamed females.
Yeah, you can't kiss and tell. Come on, man.
Would you bring head?
Well, of course. I've always got to have. They get upset if I leave the house without them. So.
Yeah. Listen, Al, it was an absolute pleasure to catch up with you today, man. I know you're really busy and you've got to go now to a prison to shoot some promos.
I was going to say you got to finish that. I'm not just going to a prison. I'm going to film vignettes at a prison.
Yeah, the cops are outside.
I'm going to a prison. Done. No. I'm going to a prison to film a talent, do a vignette, do some vignettes. Yes, that's what I'm doing.
Al Snow is not getting arrested. Just so everyone knows.
Not gotten, you know, I've only gotten arrested once, and that was for a broken headlight. So that made the big internet scandal, and I had to go on the next day and go, look, I know you think it's something exciting. I got arrested for a broken headlight. That was it.
Did that actually make the dirt sheets? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, it made it on Google and made a bunch of other places. Which I'm flattered. I think it's awesome that people think I'm still over enough that they can use me as clickbait to, you know, that somebody's actually going to give a shit that I got arrested or anything else. I mean, that's tremendous. That's awesome. Yeah. I'm happy. So, you know, but and real quick, if anybody wants to follow me, they can follow me at The Real Al Snow on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And if they want to find out about more OVW, they can go to @ovwrestling.com, or they can go to at aswa.live, which is our wrestling school, the Al Snow Wrestling Academy, which is the only actually certified by the State Office of Proprietary Education as a trade school for professional wrestling, sports, entertainment, and broadcasting in the world. And we're working on getting our federal accreditation. And we're on Fight TV every Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, live for 2 hours from 7 to 9. And then regionally around the state of Kentucky, and then nationally, and then of course on Sky on Tuesdays every week. And you know, please support professional wrestling, and thank you all for being fans. I really appreciate it, because if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have a job. So
thank you so much, Al.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Best of luck with everything.